Sleep, sleep, sleep.
That's what I do.
Gah!
Welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparin with you guys, live from the Pauling Market Studios here in LA, obviously. And we got an amazing show for you today. Old School's come back tomorrow for the members. Great time to become a member, hit the join button. And today, enormously important developments out of Gaza. And then Donald Trump might actually go to jail. So we'll talk about that because of developments. And then is there a Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro debate coming up on the Young Turks? I don't know. We'll discuss later in the program, we'll find out. All right, Casper's got the news.
Well, we begin with some big updates in Gaza. Let's get right to it.
Hamas did just release a statement on their official Telegram channel saying that Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas's political bureau, has made a phone call to the Qatari prime minister as well as to the Egyptian minister of intelligence, Abbas Kamel, and quote, informed them of Hamas's agreement to their proposal regarding a ceasefire agreement.
You just heard from CNN's Jeremy Diamond that Hamas has agreed to the terms of a ceasefire deal. They did so this morning. Now, the terms under the framework do not call for a permanent ceasefire, but rather a potential longer pause in the fighting. Just to sum it up, this ceasefire deal is not much of a deal for Hamas, but they were willing to take it. Now, the latest Egyptian framework, as it's being referred to, could see the release of 20 to 33 Israeli hostages over the course of many weeks. There would be a weeks-long ceasefire during this exchange of hostages, and the agreement would entail Israel releasing some Palestinian prisoners. Now, the pause in fighting could, under this deal, potentially lead to a much longer term ceasefire that could last up to a year, according to the reporting from Jeremy Diamond. Now, CNN reports that the news spread in Gaza of Hamas's announcement and Palestinians began celebrating. But unfortunately, it appears that that celebration might have been a little too early, a little premature, because now we're hearing that Israel is very unlikely to agree to the ceasefire deal, even though previously they had signaled that they would agree to it. An Israeli official speaking on condition of anonymity said the proposal that Hamas had accepted was a watered down version of an Egyptian offer and included elements that Israel could not accept. This would appear to be a ruse intended to make Israel look like the side refusing a deal, said the Israeli official who spoke on condition of anonymity.
He's lying, by the way.
Okay, the only ruse here, though, is the fact that Israel never intended to accept that ceasefire deal. In fact, an official briefed on the peace talks, also speaking on condition of anonymity, said, however, that the offer Hamas had accepted was effectively the same as one agreed at the end of April by Israel. But as we knew earlier, I mean, Netanyahu had made clear, ceasefire deal or not, I'm gonna invade Rafah, and that is currently what's happening as we speak. I'll get to those details in a moment. Cenk.
Yeah, and so I want to clarify two really important things here. Who negotiated the deal? So on one side it was Qatar and Egypt, on the other side it was America. And so America negotiated this deal. Israel said that they were going to sign off on it. In fact, as Anna just pointed out to you, at the end of April, they said, yeah, we would definitely sign it. Except that the entire time Netanyahu has been saying, whether there's a ceasefire or not, we're going to level Rafah. Well, that's the whole point of a ceasefire, is that you don't level Rafah. So that's basically saying America's wasting its time. We're never going to honor a deal. Look, the great thing about this is he could prove us like not even wrong. This is what we're telling you, is this is the direction it's heading, with Netanyahu saying he's going to reject it. But if he turns around and accepts it, that's amazing. And that's what I thought earlier today. I'll come back to what changed since then in a minute. But I don't want you to think that the Israel statement that it was Hamas's deal is in any way accurate. No, this was negotiated by all the parties here. Hamas was holding out, and we were saying that Hamas was wrong for holding out. So what broke the dam? There's 3 stages to it. In stage 2, Hamas wanted a permanent ceasefire, and Israel only wanted one that lasted about 40 days, okay? And the way that they broke through that problem was they put in the words sustainable calm instead of permanent or 40 days. So what does sustainable calm mean for the second stage of the ceasefire? No one knows. But that was a diplomatic way of saying, okay, stop, we'll take the 40-day ceasefire, and hopefully it'll turn into something bigger afterwards, but it's not guaranteed. So it's actually Hamas giving in to Israel's demands.
Yeah, Hamas conceding to Israel, knowing full well that, like, let's keep it real, unlikely to have a sustained calm or a sustained peace or a sustained ceasefire. Fact of the matter is the fighting was gonna continue, right, after some brief pause, and that's not a ceasefire. I love this new era we're in where we're all pretending like a pause in the fighting is a ceasefire. A ceasefire means, okay, both parties agreed we're gonna stop the fighting, period. Not we're gonna stop the fighting for a few weeks and then we're gonna ramp up again after Israel gets what it wants. That's not a ceasefire.
Yeah, so the original Israel demands throughout in all of these so-called ceasefires have always been eminently unreasonable, which is we want the other side to completely surrender, and if they don't, we're going to kill them all. It's just a matter of when. So we can stop for 30 days, we can stop for 40 days, we'll regroup, we'll refresh, we'll restock, and then we'll come back and kill you again. Well, it's not really a peace offer. Nevertheless, Hamas said yes now because the destruction of Rafah is imminent, and Israel has been killing the hostages. And so what I mean by that is, I think that Israel's been holding 5.5 million hostages for a long time now. The West Bank and Gaza are all hostages under the iron thumb of Israel. That's just a fact. And they can kill any of them at any point that they like. They often brag about it and say, well, what? We didn't kill them all, right? And so here, they've been bombing Rafah as both as a prelude to this siege potentially, and as a warning to Hamas. So in one bombing recently, they killed 18 children. In another bombing recently, they killed 10 children. So those are killing the hostages, saying how many kids do you want us to kill before you say yes to the deal, which is a despicable way to operate. But nevertheless, Hamas said yes. So Israel is definitely lying, definitely, about saying, oh, this is just Hamas on their own saying yes. Nonsense.
Is anyone really surprised? Like, did anyone really fool themselves into thinking that Israel was negotiating in good faith for a ceasefire?
Yeah,
I mean, again, well, you were wrong, and you should never trust Israel when they claim that they're engaging in good faith on ceasefire negotiations. Look, Netanyahu has made it clear, I'm gonna invade Rafah whether there's a ceasefire agreement or not, which means he is not engaging in good faith. Someone who engages in good faith doesn't say, oh, even if we reach a ceasefire agreement, I'm still going to engage in the fighting in Rafah. And to be sure, that is currently happening as we speak. So this morning, news broke that Israel had informed 100,000 Palestinians sheltering in Rafah that they must evacuate. This is in eastern Rafah specifically. And the real question is, where exactly are they supposed to go, considering the fact that major portions of the Gaza Strip have already been leveled? Here are more details on that.
They'll go to an area in the middle zone, Lauren, called Deri Bala, where there is literally raw sewage in the streets, or maybe to Al Mawasi, which is a beach. Same story applies. Nowhere is safe, but as unbearable as this is, it's happening and it's going to be horrific. There's a lot of children who have had amputations who are back living in tents. Those families will find it hard to move, but geographically, logistically, no, you still can't. A lot of families will not be able to move to the north if they'd hoped to. Khan Yunis is impossible. That's another city bordering Rafah. That is rubble, not a little bit, but street after street of rubble. So they'll be pushed into this area called Mawasi, Lauren, which is a beach area. It's sand. It has next to no sanitation or hygiene. It's getting hot right now in Gaza. It's raining today, but it's getting hot. So they'll be in tents side by side, 5 or 6 times the population density of New York City, but all on the ground, not a high rise to be seen, with no hospital care.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no brake on this car. And it's been clear from the very beginning in regard to Netanyahu, his far-right government, and what they intend to do. In fact, and by the way, that was UNICEF spokesperson James Elder explaining what the conditions on the ground are and how there's really no place for these Palestinians to evacuate to. Remember, there is some 1.4 million displaced Palestinians currently sheltering in Rafah. It's densely populated, which makes a ground invasion and the bombings that have been occurring in Rafah so devastating for the civilian population. And in Tel Aviv, family members of the Israeli hostages, to Cenk's point, have been protesting. And I think what you hear from the brother of one of the hostages in this next clip gives you a sense of what Israelis on the ground in Israel are feeling in regard to how Netanyahu has handled this war and how little he has shown any real concern for the hostages themselves. Watch.
Bibi, we call you to reach a ceasefire deal which secures the release of all hostages. Ceasefire that secures the release of hostages. The war actually didn't end, Bibi, but know that the war ended. You can't lie to us. You are taking more time so you and Ben-Gvir can stay in power. You are taking more time so you will stay in power. You don't care about the 133 or 132 hostages. An operation in Rafah will cause the death of the hostages. You don't have a mandate to kill 132 citizens of Israel.
So look, I get that there are huge swaths of the population, both in the United States and in Israel, who don't care about the unnecessary deaths and slaughter of innocent Palestinian civilians. But since Israeli lives are considered more important to these individuals, are you at all concerned about the hostages who are also going to suffer the brunt of that attack on Rafah?
Yeah, so, and if they kill the hostages by accident, they'll say, oh, it was Hamas's fault, they were hiding behind the hostages, blah, blah, blah. But they can get the hostages back today, or beginning today. And it looks like, for the moment being, that Israel is rejecting. So why did I believe that Israel would take it? Some you could say chalk it up to naivete, some for real reasons. So, this is, I'm embarrassed saying it out loud, but America was putting a lot of pressure on Israel to accept a ceasefire. And as I say that out loud, I think that's a joke. We already gave them the $17 billion plus the $3 billion Biden had funneled to them illegally beyond Congress's back. So there's about $20 billion. We could have used that as leverage for peace. Instead, we chose to give it to them, give away all of our leverage. So we become a laughing stock for Israel, just something they trot out every once in a while to slap around, right? Okay, but there are other real reasons why I thought Israel might take it. One is that the 40-day deal is terrific for Israel, because what it does is it still pens in the Palestinians into Rafah. They get all their, this is Netanyahu, even though Hamas has some hostages, which is supposed to be a little bit of brakes in the car. Without any brakes in the car, Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, and Smotrich could do their actual plan. Smotrich has now said, and Haaretz's paper in Israel is condemned him for it, that he wants a total annihilation, a Holocaust of the Palestinians. So he's still in the cabinet. But by the way, at college campuses, they have naughty chance. That Israeli cabinet minister says, let's do a complete annihilation of the Palestinian people. And yet, barely a peep out of American media. Anyways, but the bottom line is the ceasefire is to Israel's advantage, way more than it is to Hamas's advantage. So that's why I thought they might take it. And number three now is that nevertheless, their cabinet is split. So Ben-Gvir and Smotrich is saying, no, kill them. And Ben-Gvir says, why are we arresting anyone? Why don't we just murder them on the spot? And Haaretz has called them out on that as well. Okay, so this is the kind of sick genocidal freaks that are on the Israeli cabinet, full-blown terrorists. No question about it, meets every definition. Ben-Gvir celebrates terrorists, etc. You get it. But Benny Gantz is significantly in the camp of do not go into Rafah, okay? If there's a ceasefire, take the ceasefire. Benny Gantz is the most likely opponent to Netanyahu in an election, even though he's on the Israeli cabinet. And he's in the camp of saying, maybe we listen to the Americans giving us $20 billion a year, just a smidge, just a tiny smidge. And plus, finally, the fourth and most important reason is, I think Gantz, and I hope there's a couple of others, are beginning to realize that if Israel does a siege of Rafah and they kill tens of thousands more civilians, that the damage is going to be catastrophic, not just to the Palestinians, which it appears no one in the Israeli cabinet cares about.
100%.
Right, but also catastrophic for Israel. because if they slaughter the people in Rafah, their reputation is going to be unrecoverable. And I know all the propagandists will say, no, it's all Hamas's fault, and we'll trick the whole world into thinking the Palestinians who have no power are all no good, dirty, violent, savage terrorists, and we'll come out and AIPAC will control Congress, etc. And I'm tired of AIPAC. I can explain to you clearly how AIPAC definitely controls the US Congress through the funding, etc. Like anyone else could, but they have chosen a smart strategy to buy off all of our politicians. But none of that is going to help them if the whole world despises them forever.
Yeah, AIPAC can't buy the whole world.
Yeah.
Okay, they can't change the narrative in every country. The US is different. Our political system is, I wouldn't say unique, but we literally have bribery baked into our political system. And the reason why the US happens to be Israel's top ally is because of that. The international community is looking at this war completely differently. And I mean, you even have countries that have now committed to ending all business relations and trade with Israel. One of the more recent countries that announced this was Colombia last week. And so, you have South Africa bringing a genocide case against Israel. So in terms of how the international community views Israel, I think that you're correct, Cenk, in that there is irreparable harm being done to the reputation of Israel as a country on the international stage. And you can't simply see the perception of Israel through an American lens, because America really is unique in how we are unwavering in our support for Israel, regardless of what it does.
Yeah, and just another important clarification. Look, guys, there's no monoliths, there's no councils, there's no coordination. So different Israelis disagree, different Jewish people disagree. So Chuck Schumer is in the camp of Jewish Americans who are saying, oh, please don't go into Rafah. It's gonna make us look horrible. Horrible, don't do it. Biden and Blinken, etc., are in that camp. Whether they're effective or not is a different question, but they genuinely are in that camp. It looks like Benny Gantz and other Israelis are in that camp. Even if they don't care about Palestinians, they understand the concept that going into Rafah is going to make them an international pariah ad infinitum. Maybe irreversible, right? And that is terrible for Israel. And guys, part of the reason that they understand that is that every human rights group, every branch of the United Nations, and every reporter on the scene is saying going into Rafah would be an unmitigated humanitarian catastrophe. 3/4 of Gaza, which is already tiny, it's just the size of Vegas. 3/4 of Gaza is already an evacuation zone. If you go in there, Israel says they have a right to kill you. So they have 1/4 of a tiny amount of area left, which, by the way, apparently has landmines. Are you kidding me? Look, I want to look into it more before I go off on it. But I read in several stories that that landmines might have been planted on the road for refugees. If IDF did that, that is, I mean, that it doesn't get any more terroristic than that. So hold on, that's just a couple of sources. They just mentioned it in passing. What everyone agrees to is unexploded ordnances. So Israel dropped so many bombs that some percentage didn't go off. So as they're trying to navigate this tiny 1/4 of Gaza left, one, they're gonna leave behind what they had left. They're gonna be more prone to starvation and all the elements. And number two, there could be bombs going off both in the air and underneath them as they do this yet another ethnic cleansing trip inside of Gaza. So if Israel can't see that the world will hate them for that, they're completely blinded Goliath. And I think that is where Netanyahu is right now. Yeah. I hope to God Benny Gantz and the others put enough political pressure on him inside of Israel, and those good people that you just heard from inside Israel, that they accept a ceasefire, which is on Israel's terms. Yeah. If they don't, it is going to be horrible for everyone involved.
When we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit about how the US is handling the perception toward Israel by attempting to censor social media. That and more coming up.
It's an amazing story.
Don't miss it.
So a couple things, guys. If you're on YouTube, make sure you ring the bell, members and non-members, because you'll get notices not only on our videos, but when we go live, which is really pretty neat. And we're gonna go live with interviews, go live with breaking news updates, etc. So make sure you're ringing the bell on YouTube, and we appreciate you guys that do that. Like I said, Old School's back tomorrow. So that's Tuesday, May 7th, Ben Mankiewicz and I, and it's at 9:30 Eastern. It's for members only when it's live. Later we'll put up podcasts, but check out Old School tomorrow. It's back, and it's thanks to you guys. And please, if you can, make donations at tyt.com/team to offset those costs as well as others, but especially in bringing Old School back. And Metal Turtle and John Cornwall have already done that. We appreciate you guys. And Bodger99 just became a member through tyt.com/team. We love having you guys as our team. And with you guys, we become unbreakable. That's why we're one of the very few digital media companies left in the whole country. And it's because of you guys are our backbone. All right, Michael Napin says today's a good hair day, dapper looking host. Well, thank you, yes, I did just get a haircut. Genocide Joe says, how do you make peace with a government that has never wanted peace and is backed by the world's sole superpower? You do it by doing things like saying, hey, we'll give you 17 billion extra, but only if you do a peace deal. But you don't do it by going, oh, here's the 17 billion. Oh, AIPAC money, send me the money, send me the money. And by the way, guys, when I say AIPAC controls Congress completely, that is absolutely true. It is a provable fact. And Intercept is another great story about how they're trying to take out Pramila Jayapal's sister in a congressional run in the state of Washington, okay? So they do it all the time. But that doesn't mean they're the only ones that control Congress. Pharmaceutical industry completely controls Congress. The banks, the oil companies, the defense contractors completely control Congress. Anyone can control this Congress if you just do enough legalized bribes. So if you're watching from outside the country, you don't know, America has legalized bribery. They're just called campaign contributions. You can give millions to these politicians, and they're totally open for business. It's an auction. Anyone can buy them. It is not about any ethnic group or any one country. Third Party Time writes in, Netanyahu will never agree to a longer pause in the fighting because that would result in his criminal cases moving forward to the courtroom and eventually jail. I think a lot of Israelis understand that, as you saw in that clip that we played for you guys, and their patience is beginning to run a little bit thin on that. But we'll see. We'll see if Israel has become irreversibly right wing, and or if Benny Gantz or anyone else can actually get an election called and win that election, which would be the greatest thing that happened in a long time. I wouldn't be naive in thinking, oh my God, Benny Gantz is the savior. He's definitely going to do a peace deal, but it's a hell of a lot better than this. And Wang Jun writes in, no way in hell the guy who nearly started a war with Iran wants the fighting to stop. A lot of good points. We'll see what happens. We'll be back.
Hot dog is my favorite meat. Oh.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, GD111, Sneer 30S, Robin Hull, Kraken Engineer, and Marianne Kelly. They all just joined by hitting the join button below the video on YouTube. You guys are our heroes. You allow us to do this show where we do truth telling without any fear or favor, as you can tell every single day. And Jesse gifted 5 Young Turks memberships on YouTube. Jesse, we appreciate you. Anna.
Well, the debate over whether or not to ban TikTok rages on, and Mitt Romney decided to say the quiet parts out loud.
Some wonder why there was such overwhelming support for us to shut down potentially TikTok or other entities of that nature. If you look at the postings on TikTok and the number of mentions of Palestinians relative to other social media sites, it's overwhelmingly so among TikTok broadcast. So I'd note that's of real interest, and the president will get the chance to make action in that regard.
Republican Senator Mitt Romney said the quiet parts out loud during a conversation with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Now, this conversation took place at the McCain Institute's 2024 Sedona Forum in Arizona, where the two lamented the fact that social media is opening people's eyes to some of the atrocities that are being carried out by Israel's government. And basically, they admit that that's part of the reason why there's this effort to ban TikTok in the first place, to shut down access to the app and shut down access to some of the information and postings that young people are engaging in, which does not have a favorable view in a lot of cases toward Israel's military operations on Gaza. Now, first, here's Mitt Romney acting kind of confused about the public's worsening perception of Israel. We'll get to more sound in just a minute.
Why has the PR been so awful? I know that's not your area of expertise, but you have to have some thoughts on that, which is, I mean, as you said, why has Hamas disappeared in terms of public perception? An offer is on the table to have a ceasefire, and yet the world is screaming about Israel. It's like, why aren't they screaming about Hamas? Accept the ceasefire, bring home the hostages. It's said it's all the other way around. I mean, typically the Israelis are good at PR. What's happened here? How have they and we been so ineffective at communicating the realities there and our point of view?
Now, this conversation happened prior to today, where Hamas actually did agree to a temporary ceasefire and conceded to a lot of the terms that Israel wanted, including the fact that the ceasefire would in fact be temporary instead of a permanent ceasefire. And Netanyahu has also, of course, promised to invade Rafah, whether there's a ceasefire agreement or not. Now, before we get to more sound, including Anthony Blinken's statements, Cenk, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought that was so telling. So number one, he just said it. Yeah, we're shutting down TikTok because we want to help Israel with their PR. He couldn't be any more clear. He said there's too much pro-Palestinian content on TikTok, and that's part of the reason why we all voted to ban TikTok. I mean, look, guys, we all knew that. If you watch the Young Turks, we explained why that was the case in a lot of ways, but it's not just that. There's other factors that are involved in TikTok. But the part I'm surprised by is him saying it in public and him saying that basically, no, all the other reasons are actually just BS.
Which is
it was just meant to help Israel.
Which is a little disastrous for those who are trying to lean into this facade in order to justify the bans of TikTok. Because remember, as Americans, we still have First Amendment rights. And if you have politicians admitting out in the open that they want to censor certain speech because they disagree with it, well, then it's gonna be easier to challenge a TikTok ban in court. Remember, one of the arguments that you keep hearing over and over again from those who are proponents of banning TikTok is we need to do this in the name of national security. You know, China is collecting your personal data. You should be very concerned about that. But in reality, it's not about a private company or even a foreign government collecting our data. When has the government ever gave a damn about anyone collecting our personal information or data? What they're concerned about is the fact that Americans are engaging in a certain type of speech that these politicians don't favor, and that speech is highly critical of Israel.
100%, and then he says, look, we were doing good PR on how Hamas hasn't accepted the ceasefire. Oops, they accepted it today. And then Israel was caught with their hand in the cookie jar or in the slaughter jar when they were like, oh yeah, we were just kidding. They called our bluff, damn it, we're gonna invade Rafah no matter what. So we'll see if Israel sticks with that line of, which is what they seem to be saying today, but it's Hamas accepted the ceasefire earlier today, so we'll see. But you see him referencing the PR there, and then he just flat out says it again, where he's like, the Israelis and us, we're normally really good at PR, and what's going wrong here? Like, we normally brainwash people into our propaganda, and we seem incapable of doing proper propaganda anymore. I mean, how will the American government and the Israeli government exist without overwhelming propaganda? And so, guys, that's why they hate social media. So every negative story you've heard about social media comes down to one and only one reason. Everything else is an excuse. In the old days, when you had mainstream media, the establishment, for all of their causes, could just do 100% propaganda through all forms of American media.
They get to dominate the narrative. And in fact, Cenk,
and he said, you notice there, he said, we're having trouble with the narrative, and Blinken's gonna come back to that, right?
I actually wanna go to that clip next, because Blinken, I mean, they're both being very candid about how they hate losing control of the narrative because of social media and the ability to speak freely on these matters. Let's watch.
In my time in Washington, which is a little bit over 30 years, the single biggest change has been in the information environment. And when I started out in the early 1990s, everyone did the same thing. You woke up in the morning, you opened the door of your apartment, your house, you picked up a hard copy of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. And then if you had a television in your office, you turned it on at 6:30 or 7 o'clock and watched the national network news. Now, of course, we are on an intravenous feed of information with new impulses, inputs every millisecond. And of course, the way this is played out on social media has dominated the narrative. And you have a social media ecosystem environment in which context, history, facts get lost, and the emotion, the impact of images dominates. And we can't discount that. But I think it also has a very, very, very challenging effect on the narrative.
Oh, historical context. You mean the historical context that people like Blinken consistently leave out and pretend like the war literally began out of nowhere on October 7th? Is that the context that he's referring to?
Yeah, so there's two super telling phrases that he used. He said that the quote, information environment has changed since the 1990s. And guys, that's exactly what I've been telling you, which is the mainstream media had a 100% lock on the narrative, and now social media has broken that monopoly. That's why I've always been on social media side. You know, they always smear, oh, fake news is coming from the social media. But listen to what he said. Oh, social media is missing historical context and facts. But then right afterwards, he said, you know, they're getting influenced by emotion and pictures. He didn't mention video, but also video. In other words, the actual facts. Pictures and videos are actual facts of what happened. And people have an emotional reaction when they see the truth and when they see reality. They're seeing babies' body parts being picked out of the rubble. That's an actual fact, right? The occupation is the historical context for this entire conflict. But before Blinken, Romney, Biden, Netanyahu were able to control the media completely, and also the pharmaceutical companies, the bankers, etc., and they were able to just feed you the narrative, which is the second thing that he mentioned near the end. He said social media has had a challenging effect on the narrative.
I mean, it's very difficult for the State Department to leak certain scoops to everyone in social media, right? Like, I mean, this is how the press worked for so long, where, you know, he mentioned this, the New York Times as one of the prime examples. Well, what happened with the New York Times in the lead up to the preemptive war in Iraq? You have members of the intelligence community literally feeding lines to reporters who worked as stenographers and helped, you know, manufacture consent for that preemptive war.
100%, totally guilty. And the New York Times claimed that they learned from those lessons. They learned nothing at all, and they were doing the same things until social media came along. And you know what social media has been doing to the New York Times and other places? They've been embarrassing them. So they've been saying, hey, wait a minute, you claim to be the paper of record. Here's something you said, it doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't comport with the reality. And then all of a sudden, there's a bunch of young reporters at the New York Times who are going, well, that's empirically true. So are we all just gonna admit that we're doing propaganda, or we're gonna correct the record? Mm-hmm. And now they've been forced to correct the record enough times. Yes, they intercepted a brilliant piece about how they're still massively skewed in favor of Israel, but overall they've done a bunch of good pieces now because social media is winning because they actually have the facts, the truth, etc. And it's even breaking down mainstream media propaganda. That is why Romney and Blinken are in a panic going, how do we put the genie back in the bottle so the people with all the money and the power can be in charge without anybody, the riffraff, questioning us?
Right, that's exactly right. Well, let's check in on college campuses because the protests persist and there has been some action taken by Columbia in regard to their main commencement ceremony.
This morning, as commencement season gets underway across the country, college campuses facing turmoil and tense protests. Columbia officially canceling its university-wide graduation ceremony, continuing with smaller-scale celebrations.
This morning, Columbia University announced that their main commencement ceremony has been canceled and that the majority of its school-level graduation events have been moved off campus due to ongoing protests of Israel's war on Gaza. Now, the university said it made the changes in consultation with student leaders and would focus its resources on keeping its smaller graduation events safe, respectful, and running smoothly. Now, keep in mind that the main graduation ceremony typically features a speech by the university's president, Shafik, and she is someone who is not really favored by the student body at the moment. And so I think they're partially doing this to save the humiliation that Shafik would face, as students very likely would turn their backs on her or protest her speech as it happened. Now, most of the ceremonies that had been scheduled for the south lawn of the main campus, where the protest encampments were taken down last week, will now take place about 5 miles north at Columbia's sports complex. And the University of Southern California is another one of these campuses where protests had taken place. There had been an encampment on that campus, but USC had also announced that they were canceling their main graduation ceremony as well. And that followed their decision to cancel a speech from their valedictorian, who happened to be a Muslim student who they were worried might say something about Palestine during her speech.
Yeah, you might be surprised about my reaction here. I got a couple of apologies. One, I apologize to USC for canceling the valedictorian speech. I was livid about that, and I said, they're saying they might cause violence. I'm like, that's preposterous. She's on the side of peace and the Palestinians. So what are the Israeli families going to attack? Or pro-Israeli families going to attack? They're not going to do that. That's crazy. Well, it turns out I was wrong. Here in LA, where USC is, that site did attack peace protesters at UCLA. And New York Times is a brilliant story that shows definitively, 100%, it was the pro-Israel side that viciously attacked the peace protesters, and their faces are on camera, and the LAPD is choosing not to arrest them. And whereas the very next morning, the victims were all arrested. So my point is, those vigilante thugs could just show up at USC and start beating the crap out of the peace side or anyone attending the graduation ceremony that they don't agree with. And apparently they're above the law.
Well, to be fair to the LAPD, Cenk, LAPD is not really in the business of arresting anyone these days, so I'm not surprised.
No, I hear you, except for the fact that they arrested 200 students the next day.
I mean, yeah,
the ones that were assaulted.
Students, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you support a Palestinian, that's the asterisk on LAPD will show up then.
Yep.
And only then. Okay. Now back to Columbia. Again, similar situation. The NYPD now has arrested hundreds of anti-Israel protesters with no evidence of any anti-Semitism, harassment, assault, etc. Because if there was, they would be charged with that, and they should be charged with that. But they have zero evidence of that. That's why no one's been charged with that. They've been charged with overstaying a protest, asterisk, against Israel. Okay, so now if Columbia does the commencement, the pro-Israel side could attack at any moment.
Yeah,
and,
look,
and the cops will be like, oh, have at it. In LA, the cops showed up and watched the pro-Israel side beat the living crap out of the peace protesters.
Let me read a few excerpts from that New York Times investigation because it was thorough. And look, for anyone who's paying close attention, you already know these details, but it is nice to see a pro-Israel paper like the Times actually do this investigation and report the facts. Let's go to graphic 9 here, where the Times writes that a New York Times examination of more than 100 videos from clashes at UCLA found that the violence had been instigated by dozens of people who are seen in videos counter-protesting the encampment. The video showed counter-protesters attacking students in the pro-Palestinian encampment for several hours, including beating them with sticks, using chemical sprays, and launching fireworks as weapons. Counter-protesters shot fireworks toward the encampment at least 6 times, according to videos analyzed by the Times. One of them went off inside, causing protesters to scream. Another exploded at the edge of the encampment. One was thrown in the direction of a group of protesters who were carrying an injured person out of the encampment. This is all caught on tape. We've shown you the videos on this show. And so again, for anyone watching this program regularly, none of this should be surprising, but it's likely surprising for a lot of Americans who might be completely shielded from this information, given how insanely biased the press has been toward the protesters, making them out to be the violent ones, when in reality they were met with violence by counter-protesters on campuses like UCLA. Now, there are other examples of violence and racist taunts being directed at some of these pro-Palestinian protesters, especially in Mississippi, which we'll get to in just a moment. But Jake, any final thoughts on the Times?
I was actually going to go to Mississippi too, because that one was not from pro-Israel groups or it's not based on religion, et cetera. It became more racial, and as you're going to see here in a second, it felt like we were back to the terrible old days of segregation, a wall of white people yelling at this one black protester. I don't know that all those guys are like pro-Israel zealots, but they saw some minorities and plenty of white folks that were in camp for peace, and their instinct was, boo, peace, let's go tear it down. But either way, you've got the anti-peace side constantly on the attack, and meanwhile, you turn on cable news and they turn the truth on its head. And they're like, no, the peace protesters are the potentially violent ones. And the violence and the outrage from the counter protesters is almost never mentioned.
So this is at the University of Mississippi. There was a large group of students filmed taunting a black woman. It happened Thursday during a heated exchange between a group of pro-Palestinian protesters and a much larger group of counter-protesters. According to CNN, about 30 pro-Palestinian protesters were demonstrating in a barricaded zone when they were surrounded by an estimated 200 counter-protesters, some holding American flags, several Trump flags, and some dressed in red, white, and blue. And in one video captured by student journalist Stacy Spiel, a student can be seen making what appears to be a racist gesture toward one of the black students. Let's take a look.
What's that?
So the woman in the video who's being taunted is a 24-year-old. Her name is Jalen Smith, a journalism and new media graduate student. She told CNN, I said some insults back too. I cursed like a sailor at them, and I regret letting them get to me like that. The monkey gestures, which you might have caught in the video that we showed you, it was on the right-hand corner. The monkey gestures and people calling me fat or Lizzo didn't hurt my feelings because I know what I am. I am so confident in my blackness. I'm so confident in my size, in the way that I wear my hair, and who I am. They do not bother me. If anything, I felt pity for them for how stupidly they acted. And so the student hasn't been, the student making the gestures, the disgusting, monkey gestures, hasn't been identified, but university officials say that at least one student's conduct or a student conduct investigation has been opened. They claim they're looking into it, and the boy seen making monkey noises has also been kicked out of his fraternity, Phi Delta Theta. But rather than condemning these disgusting, racist, threatening behaviors, Republican lawmakers, unfortunately, are backing the students who did the taunts. In fact, Representative Mike Collins of Georgia tweeted the following: Ole Miss taking care of business. That led to a lot of backlash, and he didn't really apologize for it. I can give you his statement in just a moment. But Cenk,
yeah, so two things about that. Mike Collins sees the video, including the guy dancing like a monkey. And he's like, attaboy. And that's who these Republican politicians are.
Real free speech protectors.
That's my second point. Yeah. Later in that video, the counter-protesters start chanting, lock them up, lock them up. So the guys who pretended to be in favor of free speech and were free speech absolutists and would hate cancel culture were saying, hey, those people are protesting in favor of peace, lock them up, take away their freedom, put them in prison for being in favor, just speaking in favor of peace. So look, the right wing is very confused right now because huge portions of the right wing have now realized, hey, it's America second. And that is just a fact. And everybody gets it. Like if you follow politics at all, everybody knows 320 people just voted for to make criticism of Israel illegal in America in the House. It's not unclear, but you can criticize America all you like, okay? So portions of the right wing have peeled off now and go, enough of this nonsense where we're in second place to this foreign country, right? But portions of the right wing are still like the ones in Mississippi. Oh, anyone's in favor of peace? Let's go lock them up. They don't agree with us. I don't even know I forgot what the question was. I know the answer is lock them up and take away all their freedom because we're in favor of freedom. So that's what you saw on display right there.
Listen, there's nothing more un-American and unpatriotic than wanting to crush protesters who are literally protesting the conduct of a foreign government that's heavily funded through our taxpayer money. So I'll end it there. We're gonna take a break. When we come back, we'll give you some updates on where the candidates currently stand in the latest national electoral polling. And later in the show, we'll talk about Donald Trump openly and to their faces, mocking and humiliating his potential VP picks. That and more coming up, don't miss it.
Read the polls. Read the polls, Jack.
Let's go to our members with a lot of amazing comments. Georgie Girl wrote in, weren't the Gazans told to go to Rafah for quote unquote their safety? Yeah, they were. But they were told to go to Khan Yunis earlier and Khan Yunis was bombed. They were told to go to Rafah, now Rafah is being bombed. The idea that Israel doesn't intend to kill civilians is ridiculous, totally, utterly untrue. If you hear someone saying that they're trying to avoid civilian casualties, honestly, they're just doing propaganda and totally lying to you. They do a Where's Daddy program where they murder the family members of suspected militants picked out by a AI. They're not even necessarily militants, but they make sure to kill their children as well. Let alone murdering the humanitarian aid workers like World Central Kitchen, which you saw with your own eyes, let alone the kill zones, etc. There's no question Israel intends to murder Palestinian civilians, and they do it on a regular basis, and we've now shown you overwhelming evidence of that. So when they say go move to Rafah for your safety, what that means is it's more convenient for us to pack you into Rafah for now, and later we'll bomb and kill you there. So that's, I can translate IDF speak into actual English. Dragon with a girl tattoo says, it's obvious that Netanyahu has considered the hostages acceptable losses from the start. Of course, including the 3 hostages that were killed in a kill zone. He doesn't care about the hostages. He just views them as collateral damage along with every Palestinian in Gaza. Who cares if they all die? It's all in service of Netanyahu's political career. That's why a lot of Israelis are pissed at him. Lou B says the rest of the world sees our commitment to Netanyahu also. We will not escape the Israeli crimes against the Palestinians. To that point, Lou, my whole life, American media has been 100% racist against Muslims. So that sounds like, oh wait, you can't say that. That's really harsh. And what's your proof for that? Guys, America and Israel have been dropping bombs, imprisoning and killing Muslims my whole life, while American media has been saying, oh, the Muslims are the violent ones. The Muslims are the terrorists. They made us murder them. They made us invade Iraq. They made us invade Afghanistan. They made us invade countries that had nothing to do with us. And they made us kill the Palestinians and occupy the Palestinians. That kind of disgusting racism against Muslims is all I've ever known from American media. So am I surprised at how grossly biased they are now? Of course not, they hate us. David says, how does Biden not get these people are not acting in good faith? It's the exact same with the Republicans in the border bill. Give them what they want just to get slapped in the face. Cut all funding now. Brother, look, I don't know. Biden is a really, really unintelligent person. So I say that because he does genuinely seem to think the Republicans, they're gonna turn around, aren't they? They're gonna be swell soon, aren't they? So it's possible that he's just a moron. That it's just his only attribute is the ability to take maximum number of bribes. But likely, he knows Israel's not gonna stop. He knows that giving away all of his leverage just encourages them to kill more Palestinians. He doesn't care. He's taking $11.2 million from AIPAC. As long as the check clears, Biden is happy with any genocide that's going on right now. We'll be back. Back on TYT, Jen and Anna with you guys. And these wonderful people. Jan B gifted 5 memberships on YouTube. Biddy Dragon gifted 20. You guys are the best. We love you for it. We appreciate you. You make this show possible. Mizia just joined by hitting the join button. But get a load of this. Kevin Randall upgraded through the join button to executive producer. And brother, Kevin, you are an executive producer. Executive producers put the show together through financing and other means. And when you guys go to the producer and executive producer level, you guys are actually the executive producers of this show, and we really appreciate you for it. Anna.
All right, let's talk about the latest related to the general election. The latest Washington Post Ipsos poll spells trouble for Biden. Unfortunately, this is an ongoing theme when it comes to this general election. This particular poll, though, hyper focuses on the black vote and especially black voters under the age of 30 who have really lost favor toward Biden. Now, the poll indicates that a smaller percentage of black voters plan to cast a ballot this time around compared to 2020. So not only is Biden losing support among black voters, but there's an even smaller percentage of black voters who plan to vote in general. So the poll of more than 1,300 black adults finds that 62% of black Americans say they're absolutely certain to vote, which is down from 74% in June of 2020. The 12 percentage point drop outpaces the 4-point drop among Americans overall from 72% to 68%. So again, not only has Biden lost support among key voters in the Democratic Party, there's just a smaller percentage of Democratic voters who plan to vote to begin with. Now, Biden's support rises to 78% among black voters ages 40 to 64 and 88% among those 65 years and older. So there is a little bit of a generation gap here because when it comes to younger voters, that's where Biden really does run into problems, especially when it comes to black voters. So 74% of black registered voters say they will definitely or probably vote for Biden. So to be clear, the majority of black voters still support Biden. Just 14% of black voters say they would definitely or probably support Trump. That is smaller than Trump's black support in some recent national and state polls, though it would still mark a slight improvement from his performance in 2020. And if you can recall, Trump did increase his support among black voters in the 2020 general election. Now, why have black voters soured on Joe Biden? Well, it's because Biden hasn't delivered on some of his key promises, including the voting rights bill, which I knew was eventually gonna come back and hurt Biden. They're also unhappy with how Biden has handled the war in Gaza, and they feel that the resources that are being sent to Israel would be better used to improve the lives of Americans here in America. And many also talked about inflation, especially when it comes to the costs of groceries. Now, the Washington Post tried to find some silver linings here. I'll tell you how in just a moment. But Cenk, where Biden has seen the biggest drop among support among black voters is those 30 years and younger. That is where people are really starting to sour on Biden.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things here. First of all, the Democrats these days are basically just going with negative campaigning. And look, I get it, they're not alone. Republicans have been doing that for a long, long time. But so we recently showed you a clip where they were explaining how now they're gonna plant negative stories about RFK Jr. in the press, because that's the only go-to move they have. And 80% of mainstream press is just negative Trump stories. So that's the Democrat strategy. I would propose a strategy that would get these voters back and excited, making the chance of winning much more likely. And that's actually delivering on your promises. But I know for the Democratic leadership, that is unthinkable. For mainstream media, they think that is so outrageous to expect politicians to deliver on their promises. Joe Biden delivered on 10 to 15% of his promises. Brother, that means you're bragging about lying 85 to 90% of the time.
Yep.
And they genuinely think it's outrageous to expect them to actually do anything. So for example, one of the bare minimums was voting rights. And they told African-American community in the country, give us the 2 Georgia seats. You guys remember that clearly, right?
The runoff elections.
The runoff elections. Give us, if Ossoff and Reverend Warnock win, we're definitely getting you voting rights. And then they didn't even try. They lamely put it in a bill. And then Manchin said, get the hell out of here. I'm not giving black people voting rights. And Sinema was like, yeah, me too, okay? Yep. And they were like, right away, sir, we drop it right away. Who cares? Who cares about black people anyway? But I think that's actually the second largest issue. I think the largest issue is that for under 30-year-olds, they're getting actual information and not TV propaganda. So since they're getting actual information, they know, wait a minute, I'm not the crazy one for thinking housing prices are higher and student debt is higher and my wages are lower and my productivity is not being returned to me from these corporations. We live under corporate rule. I see that clear as day. It's confirmed by actual facts I'm seeing in social media. Whereas on TV, they're like, the status quo is great, do not rebel, do not rebel. And under 30-year-olds, both white and black, and every other race are going, oh, I get it now. You guys are liars.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, you see the difference in the age groups clearly here. Let's go to graphic 5, where the Post writes that today just about half of black people in their 30s approve of Biden, 51%.
That is a terrible number.
That is so bad. Let that sink in. And this is what happens when the party takes the votes of a specific demographic for granted. Eventually, the chickens are gonna come home to roost, and that is what you are experiencing here. Let me read the rest of that information to you. So ratings rise to 59%, which still isn't so great. Among those in their 40s, 72% among those ages 50 to 64, and 85% among black adults ages 65 and older. And I do think Cenk makes a good point in regard to the media diet of these different age groups. The older you are, the more likely you are to rely on television news, cable news in order to get your information. And if you're watching MSNBC, well, you might be under the impression that Biden's doing a bang up job and everything is fine. But younger people are a little more plugged in and they have a little more of a diverse media diet and they're kind of seeing what the facade is and they're not buying it.
Yeah, and so there's a little bit of nuance there. First, I want to just double down on what Anna said because the black vote in favor of Democrats used to be over 90%. And not like in the 1960s, no, in the last several elections. I mean, Biden has taken the black vote off of a cliff. And it's not just the black vote, it's also the Latino vote. So we've been screaming on this show, please deliver for them. I'm begging you deliver for them. We're not asking for some crazy progressive agenda. There is no crazy progressive agenda anyway in terms of economic issues, but we're just asking you to do the bare minimum Democratic agenda. Stop lying to them. What do Latino voters want? Well, just read the polls. You don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take anybody else's word for it. They want higher paying jobs and they want health care. What do you mean? Everything's about identity politics. We said we like brown people. You idiots. Read the poll. They want jobs, better paying jobs, health care, and you're not giving it to them. Why are you not giving it to them? Because your corporate donors own you. They own you completely. And guys, last thing that's so important, this is where the nuance is. This is not Trump versus Biden. Whether you're talking about younger black voters or anyone else, they're not saying, oh my God, I fell in love with Trump, okay? No, this is them realizing, oh, both sides are full of crap. Because why did Biden win the 2020 election? Because younger voters showed up in bigger numbers than they ever have. Why did they show up to vote against Trump? Because they were seeing the reality of Trump. TV also agreed in that case, but social media showed you what Trump really was. And younger voters were like, I don't want that. So they went and voted against him. Now they're seeing the reality of Biden, and a lot of them are saying, well, I don't want that either. And so they're largely gonna stay home, and when they do, Biden's gonna have no chance of winning.
All right, that does it for our first hour, but stick around because our second hour might be our finest hour, okay?
Damn, strong words.
We're gonna talk a little bit about Donald Trump's fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend where he humiliated potential VP picks to their faces. We'll also talk about Kristi Noem just taking the L's, posting the L's and doing so proudly. A lot of fun stuff to get to, don't miss it. We'll be right back.
Read the polls. Read the polls, Jack.
And read some one-star reviews of the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Donnie Franchise said, pretty much it's like listening to a trash compactor. Someone else said, negative, anti-American propaganda. And others said, out of context, misquotes, typical leftists who are afraid to debate, just smear. These two would be perfect for CNN or MSLSD. Well, Donnie, you might have a point. Because I feel like a trash compactor right now after taking in all those garbage reviews. But thanks for listening anyway. We are in fact unapologetically progressive. And if you're not ready for bold commentary, then we're not the show for you. On the Young Turks, we speak up about the issues that matter and we want to make positive change happen. And now here's why we actually do the show. Mariel Morales said, found this podcast from the True Crime Podcast, Fruit Loops, and other great progressive podcasts. I've become an instant fan of the Young Turks. Great conversation, great takes, very well composed, factual podcast, very informative. Love to hear that. Zed55 said, it's a joy to experience such awareness and intelligence from fascinating people. And Anna is gorgeous and brilliant. Apparently I'm just fascinating, but I'll take it. Paul for Progress said, news well delivered. Appreciate it. KOOK said, Democrats and Republicans are fair game for TYT. And if Anna or Cenk provide disinformation about anything, they will admit they made a mistake and correct it. We appreciate you noticing that we are honest. To people who actually listen to the substance of the show, thank you. Your listenership supports what we do. Leave a 5-star rating for the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Let's take the ratings back from the trolls. Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique, exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members-only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got 12 progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together.
A new TYT app experience is now available. Check out brand new features like voting in polls and signing petitions. You can also follow your favorite TYT shows, join the live chat, engage in message boards, search for and follow topics you care about, and much more. Download the app by searching for TYT in the App Store or via Google Play.
just love you.
That's what I do.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also Tyson Adams, who just joined by hitting the join button below and became an American hero. Same with Margaret Blue Magoo Powell. Tyson also gifted a membership, which we deeply appreciate. John, Chris, and Box also gifted 5 memberships, which we really appreciate. I'm gonna read one comment from one of our YouTube members, Gabby Mathis, who said, and she speaks for us all. I'm so sick of racism all over the world. I'm Jewish, and a few years back, a swastika was painted on our wall. I'm Jewish, but stand with Palestine. Gabby, we love you for it, and we're so sorry that you went through that. Guys, this is not about religion. If you make it about religion, you lost the thread and you're deeply counterproductive. It's about a foreign government. Governments make mistakes. Governments go in the wrong direction. Our job is to correct them, whether it's the American government or any other government. Anna.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about what Trump was up to over the weekend, because his potential VP pick is really dominating election-related news, and that came up during this fundraiser over the weekend. A donor lunch, a fundraiser, if you will, over the weekend at Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump reportedly mocked 2 of his potential VP picks to their faces, which makes Trump a little more fun, to be honest with you. So what did he say? Well, let's start off with Ohio Senator JD Vance, who, to be quite honest, I had forgotten was even considered as a potential VP pick. But apparently he said of JD Vance, quote, JD has turned out to be incredible. You know, he wasn't a supporter of mine. It shows you I can change him. He was saying things like, this guy's a total disaster. So it is true, if you're unfamiliar with JD Vance's origin story, he did start off by being a vociferous critic of Donald Trump, outspoken critic. During the 2016 campaign, Vance had identified himself as never Trump and said he, I know, right? So embarrassing, and loathed the former president, and once wondered on Twitter, quote, what percentage of the American population has Donald Trump sexually assaulted? Now, Vance's opinion of Trump changed after he realized that pandering to Trump is what you need to do as a Republican candidate in order to gain some favor among the Republican voting base. But he wasn't the only notorious Trump flip-flopper / bootlicker who was humiliated at this donor lunch. I just wanted to start with Vance because that was the more tame example of Trump humiliating someone. We're gonna get to Tim Scott in just a moment.
Yeah, this is what he does on a regular basis. That's why when you go to endorse him, you have to be ready for the humiliation that comes as part of the package. And so all these guys knew, or at least should have, I mean, they're the dumbest people in the world if they didn't know that was coming. You remember what he did to Chris Christie and so many others last time around. Like Jeff Sessions, and it goes on and on and on, right? So they signed up for getting roasted. So that's what he's doing here. You know, there was a Tom Brady roast over the weekend on Netflix. This is the Trump anti-roast, where he roasts everyone else.
Yep.
And he's like, this moron thought he could criticize me, but I broke him in half. Look at this little bitch I brought to you here. Yeah. Bend down, you little loser, okay? You see how I make the losers bend down to me?
It'd be so much fun if one of them was named Chuck. You know, Chuck roast? It's cut of meat. Yeah, okay, anyway. Let's move on to Senator Tim Scott, who's also on the short list as a potential VP pick for Trump. Trump said Scott, who got a big round of applause, was a good candidate, but an unbelievable surrogate, before adding that people thought he was a little bit dull. People are saying that Scott seems a little bit dull, which, by the way, is accurate. A guy always seems like he's about to fall asleep.
Well, 2 things about that. One is that, look, it's actually the most benign out of all of his insults. And as Anna said many times, he's the best insult comic in the country. And so that was a little tame, right? But even so, imagine any other politician or businessman or anyone else inviting a bunch of people and then roasting them involuntarily in front of an audience. And being like, hey, you see my friend over here? He's so boring. Ha ha, you're so dull. Everybody would be like, what? Why is he doing that?
It's so bad. No, I mean, it would be like Cenk saying nice things about me and then referencing audience members who have said terrible things about me, right?
Or imagine
don't do that.
No, but he's trying to pick a VP. That's his number 2, right? So if Anna or I were to say oh yeah, Anna's not bad, but she's a little dull, right in front of her.
People are saying she's dull. No one's saying that about me.
Yeah, well, that was
a little too salty, a little too spicy.
That's unlikely. But it's just, we've gotten used to Trump being a maniac. But I just wanted to remind you, in any other context, even the most benign of these comments would be outrageous and unbelievable. If Biden said it about his, I like Kamala Harris, but she's a little boring, you know what I mean? People are like, what? What did he just say, right?
Like if Biden called one of our biggest allies xenophobes. Right? That would be pretty outrageous, right?
Yeah.
Which is what Biden did last week in regard to Japan.
I hear you. Biden says other outrageous things, but he doesn't do insults of his own party members. And anyways, and then the last thing is, that's why Tim Scott's leading, because he wants his VP to be dull. Remember last time he picked Mike Pence, because he's such a sensitive little man-child that if anyone gets any of the attention that isn't named Trump, he's like, no, I don't want him getting the attention, I want me getting the attention. So that's him partly bragging about Tim Scott.
And by the way, this is what Trump is really good at, right? The insult comic part of him is one that I particularly appreciate and enjoy. And I just gotta give you a little tasty taste of what I'm talking about. Let's watch.
And then the New York Times did a fake story today, big front page, that JD wasn't sure if he wanted my support. JD is kissing my ass. He wants my support. So I'm 18 points up. If I was 18 points down, he wouldn't want my support. I'll tell you, Jim Jordan wants my support, and he's doing just fine, right? No, these are fake people. These are dishonest. These are very dishonest people. Did you ever think that she actually appointed you, Tim? And think of it, appointed, and you're the senator of his state, and she endorsed me. You must really hate her. No, it's a shame. It's a shame.
I just love you.
No, that's why he's a great politician. Today was a big story, the biggest story out there. She's engaged to be married. We never thought this was going to happen. What's going on?
I love it. I want more. Give me more.
If you don't know the story, he is referring to Tim Scott being engaged because the rumors are that he's gay. And so that's why Trump said we never thought it was going to happen. He's outing his own potential VP as gay. He's unbelievable. But what was worse, although in Republican circles that might be worse, but what was worse is he pointed to JD Vance in the crowd and was like, JD Vance kissed my ass. And then JD Vance, like a bitch, was like,
listen.
Oh my God.
There's a real problem in America. There's a real masculinity problem in America.
Yes, and it's among Republican politicians. 100%.
Terrible. Look, there's some nonsense about how Marco Rubio is another potential VP.
He's not gonna be.
That's not. Let's not even waste our breath talking about it. Come on, really, little Marco? Where did that come from? Did Marco Rubio leak something to make it appear like he was being considered? He's not being considered at all. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from, but it's nonsense. But by the way, guys, look, all this speculation about who the VP is going to be is, in itself, it's fun. It's fun, and I've done it. I'm guilty. Okay. But it's all kind of nonsense because Trump's going to pick 5 minutes before he makes the pick. He's going to decide, because he changes his mind all the time. It's whoever kissed his ass last.
It's going to be Rick Scott. No, I mean, look,
Scott.
I'm sorry, Tim Scott.
Oh, Tim Scott. Oh, my bad.
I misspoke, Tim Scott.
Because that's another senator. Obviously.
I keep going back and forth because there's a part of me that thinks he's going to pick Tulsi Gabbard. Right, because Tulsi Gabbard might appeal to some of the more moderate Republicans who don't know that she's like literally in a cult and she's a lunatic. But I think that even someone as monotone as Tulsi Gabbard might have too much riz for Donald Trump, whereas Tim Scott's not a threat. right? Tim Scott isn't gonna outshine him in any way. So I think it might be Tim Scott. We'll see.
Yeah, so for a long time I thought for sure he was gonna go with a woman, so either Marjorie Taylor Greene, Carrie Lake, or Kristi Noem. All three of those now have issues, and he doesn't like how much Carrie Lake hangs around, and she's too obsequious even for Trump. Oh, that's so miserable. Marjorie Taylor Greene a little too crazy for Trump, unbelievable. Kristi Noem a little too vicious for Trump because she murdered her own dog, unbelievable. Okay, so now having said all this, guys, the most important. So now at this point, if you made me pick today, I'd say Tim Scott. I'd agree with Anna, but he's not going to pick today. He's going to pick later, and a million things are going to happen in between. But last thing is, you have no idea how much we dodged a bullet, because reports are that he actually did the smart thing and offered it to RFK Jr. And if RFK Jr. had accepted, this election would already be over. And so for all of the attacks that the Biden team does on RFK Jr., and some of which are totally merited, by the way, RFK Jr. might have saved the country by not accepting the VP role under Trump. Because if his 10 to 15 points go over to Trump, it's good night, Irene.
Now, final thing that I'll mention about this fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend is that Trump not only humiliated his potential VP picks, he apparently tried to humiliate some of his donors who he alleged weren't donating enough to his campaign. So the Washington Post reports that Trump complained about having to take so many pictures with donors and told people in the crowd that if they didn't get a picture, it was because they didn't give enough money. He also,
He's so funny, man.
So good. He also claimed that a wedding at the property got preference over the donors because the wedding was paying more per person to be there.
He's so nakedly greedy. It's amazing to watch.
It is. At one point, as if he were at an auction, Trump told the crowd, quote, anyone who makes a $1 million donation right now at the Republican Party, to the Republican Party, I will let you come up and speak. Two donors then came to the stage, and one told the crowd, Donald J. Trump is the person that God has chosen.
Okay, well, at least that moron's out $1 million.
No, but like, listen, you can hate the game, right? But the player knows how the game is played, and he's playing the game very clearly. Like, yeah. I mean, think about the confidence, right? All right, I need you guys to donate $1 million if you want to have an opportunity to come up here and speak. And then two of the donors did it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And last thing, guys. So Donald Trump is not an honest person. He's lied about just about everything you could possibly imagine, right? But he has the appearance of honesty because he does things like this. Because an average guy that's looking at that and goes, well, that's not a standard fake politician. I mean, he's saying it like it is. And when it comes to humiliating his friends and allies, he is saying it like it is. When it comes to humiliating even his own donors, he is saying it like it is. But not when it comes to Donald Trump. Then, I won the election, my businesses were amazing. I got out of Vietnam because I had bone spurs in a foot I don't remember. Okay, the charity money is going to the actual charities. Right, so but with that air of authenticity,
no, people like it.
People like it, and that's a giant problem for fake politicians like Biden to compete with.
Yeah, I mean, Biden's playing by old rules that don't appeal to voters, whereas Trump is like, I'm corrupt and I'm being honest about it.
Kinda, yeah.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll tell you about how Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota, has really had a tough go at things.
Yes.
That's what I do.
All right, let's go to our members as always. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, ring the bell, okay? because then that way you can know when we're going live and whenever we got information coming in your direction. Okay, so C or J Likely C writes in, that's their handle. Yay, old school's back, and now on a night that I'm not working late. I donated again because TYT is like family and old school is like comfort food in a cold world. Thank you for saying that, we appreciate that. Yes, old school's back tomorrow, 9:30 Eastern. From now on, Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, and just for the members for the live show. Wang Jun says, and by the way, that also means we can curse like sailors. So cursing's back on old school, big time. Wang Jun writes in, now that Mitt has admitted why they wanted to ban TikTok, I'm waiting for him to tell us what's really inside a hot dog.
Hot dog is my favorite meat.
That's really funny. Okay, Art Guy says, it's always fun when politicians accidentally give the game away like this. I mean, we know it already, but it's good to have confirmation. Totally agree. I love it when they do it. That's why I often quote Mo Brooks, who talked about buying committee chairmanships, brazenly admitting that they're all corrupt and that the corporations totally own them. Jesus Take the Wheel writes in, Blinken is the one who lacks context, history, and facts. He's so ingrained in Washington groupthink that he doesn't understand what is actually happening in the country. People do not like their tax dollars being used to starve babies. It's that simple. Yes, for the folks who know that. If you only watch television though, you would have no idea that's happening. You might have caught one or two pieces on CNN that have done decent jobs, but outside of that, you'd never see that on MSNBC or Fox News. Isn't that interesting? Oh boy, they really disagreed. Do they? Almost all their anchors on both are all pro-Israel, and it's all the Palestinians' fault for what's happening. At that part, I'm doing a little hyperbole. To be fair, the Chris Hayes of the world are a little bit upset about what's happening in Palestine, but the hyperbole is not much, and you see it with your own eyes. Rage Against the Machine says the machine is finally breaking down, and they don't know what to do about it. That is the most accurate. That's exactly right. That's why they're in a panic. Jason Von Argo says this is what it means to speak truth to power. Unfortunately, power often reacts in a violent manner, referring to the peace protesters. That is exactly right, and that's what's happening now. The one giant violent attack was from the pro-Israel side against the UCLA protesters. Is that the impression you got on cable news? No, you got the exact opposite impression. Jenks Left Tricep of Fury says, I'm just glad the youth of today are staying informed on the atrocities going on and refuse to be gaslit. Gives me hope, just like you wrote in your book, Jenk. Thank you for saying that. And guys, part of the reason I focus on mainstream media so much on the show is because they're the primary gaslighters. These guys know that they cannot win. Look at Blinken and Romney openly talking about they can't win if they can't control the information. And mainstream media was used by the establishment to control the flow of information. It isn't anymore, that's why we have hope. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, but also RJ, Tumadre, Athena Onken, and William Conley. Thank you all for joining. They hit the join button below the video on YouTube. You guys are awesome for doing that. You could also join through tyt.com/team. You could also contribute through there too. We appreciate all of you. Anna.
Well, you might be having a bad day, but it can't be as bad as Kristi Noem's day. Did you meet Kim Jong-un?
As soon as it was brought to my attention, we went forward and have made some edits.
Who is it that you confused Kim Jong-un with?
My time in serving and making policies in this country has been extensive and covered decades.
Right, but you never went to North Korea. I know you read this book before it was published because you released video of your recording of the audio book. You didn't catch these errors when you were recording it? South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, who is considered to be on Donald Trump's shortlist as a VP pick, had a train wreck of an interview on Face the Nation over the weekend. Seems like she wasn't so prepared to face the nation, but the nation faced her and they did not like what they saw. Now, apparently Noem's book, including an anecdote about allegedly meeting with and staring down Kim Jong-un, might have been made up. Even though she referenced it twice in her book.
Not might have, it was definitely made up.
It was made up.
They took it out of the book. And she said like a half a dozen times there. Yeah, well, luckily that's been edited out of the book and that won't be in there. And so she was like, so you did meet Kim Jong-un. She's like, luckily that was edited out of the book. It's no.
Good news is we got the videos, Cenk.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so let's get to the first clip where she's confronted about it for the first time during this conversation with Brennan.
You talk about meeting some world leaders and one specific one, quote, I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. I've been a children's pastor after all. Did you meet Kim Jong-un?
Well, as soon as this was brought to my attention, I certainly made some changes and looked at this passage. And I've met with many, many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. As soon as it was brought to my attention, we went forward and have made some edits. So I'm glad that this book is being released in a couple of days and that those edits will be in place and that people will have the updated version.
So clearly she dodged the question, which led Brennan to ask directly once again, did you meet with Kim Jong-un?
So you did not meet with Kim Jong-un. That's what you're saying.
No, I've met with many, many world leaders. Many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. I think I've talked extensively in this book about my time serving in Congress, my time as governor, before governor, some of the travels that I've had. I'm not going to talk about my specific meetings with world leaders. I'm just not going to do that. This anecdote shouldn't have been in the book, and as soon as it was brought to my attention, I made sure that that was adjusted.
You talk about your time in the Armed Services Committee from 2013 to 2015. In that period of time, the leader of South Korea was a female president. I'm wondering, who is it that you confused Kim Jong-un with?
Oh, I think you need to remember, Margaret, and everybody needs to remember that I've worked on ag policy and federal policy for over 30 years. My time in serving and making policies in this country has been extensive and covered decades.
Right, but you never went to North Korea.
Specifics in this book. I talk about the fact that, yes, I have. I've been there. So
you went to North Korea?
Yeah, I went to the DMZ, and there are details in this book that talk about going to the DMZ and specifics that I'm willing to share. There's some specifics I'm not willing to share with you.
What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? What? Like, every foible that we've seen from Kristi Noem in recent days centers around the fact that she's obviously trying to seem like this tough guy or tough woman. Don't make up stories to paint that picture of yourself. It's so pathetic. There's one more clip where Brennan confronts her about, the lies. I'll get to that in just a second, but Cenk, thoughts?
My two favorite parts. As soon as that passage was brought to my attention, you wrote the book.
Allegedly.
Right, so who brought it to your attention that you wrote that you met with Kim Jong-un when you didn't? Okay, so now you know that a lot of people use ghostwriters, right? So, and some other interviewers have literally asked her about, like, did your ghostwriter put this in and you just never read your own book that you theoretically wrote? But Margaret Brennan makes a good point, which I hadn't considered. She did the audiobook version,
yes.
So she at least read that passage while doing the audiobook. So that means, no, this wasn't just comical, I wrote a book and didn't even read it, okay? No, this was her actively lying about it.
Yes,
on purpose.
yes, it was intentional.
Yeah. No, it wasn't like, oh, the ghostwriter put that in and I didn't see it. It was just, I told the ghostwriter to lie about a lot of things. So I didn't bother double checking. No, she knew. She definitely lied about it.
Can we go to that moment of that conversation, Cenk? Because Brennan does make a good point, and Kristi Noem totally flails. Like, you are on the short list for VP pick. You should know that you're going to be Oppo researched like crazy. But anyway, here's how she handled it.
You made the point to bring him up twice and that he was a little tyrant.
Do you have a question for me, Margaret?
Yes, I do. South Korea is a treaty ally. North Korea is a nuclear armed adversary. So that's a pretty big thing to confuse. I know you read this book before it was published because you released video of your recording of the audiobook. You didn't catch these errors when you were recording it?
Margaret, as soon as it was brought to my attention, I took action to make sure that it was reflected. And listen, this is what is so discouraging about politics and the media today, is that we have the White House that just recently came out and confirmed that President Joe Biden has misspoken, has made mistakes, has even outright lied over close to 150 times.
You lied about meeting Kim Jong-un and staring at this little tyrant down twice in your book. And then you pretended like you didn't mean for it to be in the book when there's video of you reading the audio version of the book for the audiobook.
Yeah, but Anna, as soon as it was brought to her attention that she was lying and had gotten caught lying.
Disaster.
Then she decided to tell the editors to take that particular lie out. How many other lies will they take out as we catch more and more? We'll find out. But it's that dastardly media. And that's the real discouraging thing about media, is sometimes they actually do their job and catch us politicians. Like, it's not that often, it's really rare, but discouraging when they do it. But I haven't gotten to my second favorite part, which is when she said, look, I'm not gonna talk about my meetings with world leaders. It's in the book. Like, that was the whole point. Like, you talked about it in the book filled with lies. We caught the lies. That's why we're having the conversation. It's not like the media was like, let's make her talk about her meetings with the world leaders. It's in the news because you wrote about it, where presumably you wanted to talk about it because you put it in your book. I had to cut out like 300 pages out of my book. So the things that you put in your book are the things you really, really want to say, okay?
Look, for a long time, I've felt that there's a double standard in the publishing industry in regard to the intensive fact checks that occur when someone on the left is trying to publish a book versus someone on the right.
Oh, I was fact checked 4 different times.
Like, how did this ever get published to begin with, right? If she's never met with Kim Jong-un, it's a completely fabricated story. How did the publisher let this slip? And the fact that it was mentioned not once but twice in the book, it's kind of incredible.
Because when people have power, they pretend to take fake offense. If hey, did you really meet with Kim Jong-un? How dare you? I thought we were allies and partners in publishing this book. Whereas when I'm like, hey brother, it's in the New York Times. Here's the exact quote. They're like, okay, but let's check it 3 more times. Okay, go ahead.
Well, let's move on to the second half of this interview because, well, Kristi Noem really loves doubling down on things that make her look real bad. So, during an insanely contentious conversation with Meet the Press's Face the Nation's Margaret Brennan, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, who is on Trump's short list for VP picks, decided to double down on her decision to kill a 14-month-old puppy. Here she is defending herself yet again.
You put it in a part of a chapter called Bad Day to Be a Goat. And then after you shot the dog, you, quote, realized another unpleasant job needed to be done. Walking back up to the yard, I spotted our billy goat. You said he smelled and would chase kids, so you took him to the gravel pit and shot him twice. How do you justify that? How was the goat a threat? And I'm asking you this because it seems like you're celebrating the killing of the animals.
Not at all. This has been a story that my political opponents have tried to use against me for years. It's well known in South Dakota and it has been to other people.
You published it in your book. You talked about killing a goat because it was smelly. This is not an attack by the media or your political opponents. You published it in your book. Oh my God, it's like the most insane thing. Okay. It's insane.
No, that was one of the greatest questions that reporters ever asked a politician. How is the goat a threat?
Oh my
God. I was waiting for her to ask, are there any animals you haven't murdered? Okay, but as I said on Friday's show, guys, this shows Kristi Noem what she thinks of Republican voters.
I know.
She thinks if I tell them I murder random animals, including puppies, they'll like me more.
No, she does.
That's the only reason to put it in the book.
No, she totally does think that. Like, okay, so There was some follow-up reporting to all of this in regard to Kristi Noem's first book. And apparently she wanted to include these anecdotes in her first book, but her publisher, which was a different publisher, convinced her not to. They talked her out of it because it would be a complete and utter disaster. And the reason why she wanted it published in her first book is because she felt that it communicated to Republican voters that she's a tough woman, decisive woman. She knows how to make the tough decisions, like killing the smelly goat on her farm. Okay.
Look, this is turning into Campaign, the Will Ferrell, Zach Galifianakis movie. Like, she's gonna punch a baby next. She's gonna be like, oh, so now you guys just want to talk about me punching a baby? You put it in the book.
Yeah,
right?
But she was decisive. She was decisive in making that tough decision to punch said baby.
Just to be clear, she hasn't punched a baby yet. So I was walking by a little kid and I said, and I punted it into the other state. Ha ha! Republicans are more vicious than anyone else. And look, hey, credit to the Republican voters because there's not a huge, Kristi Noem wave now. Like it didn't.
Republicans love animals too.
I guess
they do. Yeah.
So I guess Kristi Noem was wrong that Republicans don't like to kill puppies.
I mean, what a cartoon! Like later in the conversation with Margaret Brennan, she decides to volunteer other animals that should be executed. Let's watch.
Because you have been rumored to be a potential vice presidential candidate, as you know. And former House Speaker Newt Gingrich said, killing the dog and then writing about it ended any possibility of her being picked as VP. You talk multiple times about it. In fact, at the end of the book, you say the very first thing you would do if you got to the White House that was different from Joe Biden is you'd make sure Joe Biden's dog was nowhere on the grounds. Commander, say hello to Cricket. Are you doing this to try to look tough? Do you still think that you have a shot at being a VP?
Well, number one, Joe Biden's dog has attacked 24 Secret Service people. So how many people is enough people to be attacked and dangerously hurt before you make a decision on a dog and what to do with it?
Well, he's not living at the White House
That's
anymore.
the question that the president should be held accountable to.
Stop talking about killing and executing animals, just stop. But she can't, like she's dug that hole and she's like, you know what? I kind of like digging, I'm gonna keep doing it.
Well, she dug the hole that she killed the puppy in. Okay, like she literally put it in a ditch before she shot it to death. Now, by the way, did you notice her book is called No Going Back? Well, that's the one thing that's kind of accurate because after that killing puppy story, there's no going back to trying to be VP. Apparently, even Trump, a well-known sociopath, is disgusted by that story.
Well, okay, so there are mixed reports about how this has impacted Donald Trump's thinking about Kristi Noem as a potential VP pick. So I want to start off with what Rolling Stone had reported. So they claim that during conversations with close political allies and other confidants, sources say the former president, Donald Trump, has repeatedly brought up the puppy incident, including as recently as in the past couple of days, to criticize Noem and question her political acumen. The reporting is, by the way, based on 4 sources who are familiar with the matter and another 2 people briefed on it. Now, the sources who are not named are really important because, Cenk, they actually have a bias against Kristi Noem and they make that clear. Apparently, these sources who spoke to Rolling Stone, at least some of them, claim that they don't favor Kristi Noem as a VP pick because she's been advised by Corey Lewandowski, who they absolutely hate. So I think that the motivations of these sources is super relevant and they could very well just make up that Trump has soured on her.
Yeah, that's a great point and a good caveat to what I said. Also, Trump doesn't like dogs. So who knows if she put the story in the book just to appeal to Trump, who's known for not liking dogs.
And also, let's go to another excerpt from that Rolling Stone piece. Some separately said they were discussing this simply because Trump had been talking about Noem's puppy slaying so frequently that it was, in the words of one of the sources, getting kind of ridiculous how disgusted the former president sounded about this and how much he had been taunting Noem behind her back. I don't believe that at all. I personally do not believe that Donald Trump would like sit around stewing in disgust over Kristi Noem killing a 14-month-old puppy 10 years ago.
Let me give you a super quick tangent on rumors that might be relevant here, because Trump used to love Lewandowski because Lewandowski had no boundaries and he would actually physically push people. He was super aggressive in a way that Donald Trump enjoyed. But there were rumors that he hooked up with Hope Hicks, who Donald Trump was secretly in love with. And so then he hated Lewandowski and fired him. And then Lewandowski started hooking up with Kristi Noem and traveling the country with her. And so that's why some of the people who hate Lewandowski within Trump circles might be pressing on that wound. So now I give you all that as reported rumors in the press. None of that has been firmly confirmed, but they're significant enough that the press reported it.
One final thing that I'll note, I had mentioned that there's conflicting reports in regard to how Trump is kind of viewing all of this. Well, we gave you the Rolling Stone excerpts. We should also talk about what Axios and Insider are reporting, because they're reporting direct quotes from Donald Trump over the weekend during one of his fundraisers. And apparently leaked audio indicates that Trump said of Noem, that it's someone that I love, Trump said of Noem. She's been with me, a supporter of mine, and I've been a supporter of hers for a long time. Again, direct quote from Trump over the weekend. And just a few days prior to that, again, reports did indicate that Trump was disgusted, but that was by the unnamed sources who don't like Kristi Noem because of her relationship to Corey Lewandowski. So, look, honestly, if I were to decide whether Trump is soured on her or not, I would simply say, I don't know. We don't know. And we can only really base it based on what Trump said over the weekend through his own words, which is, I love Kristi Noem. But Kristi Noem is a little more charismatic than Trump would like for a VP pick. So
on the other hand, he loves attractive women.
He does, he does.
So,
but he doesn't like to be outshined, outshone.
No one knows who he's gonna pick, but the fact that she hasn't necessarily been eliminated gives you all you need to know about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Because if somebody was gonna be my VP pick and they bragged about murdering animals, including puppies, I would question their mental health, let alone whether I'd pick them as VP.
Just their political instincts.
Let alone their political instincts. But I wouldn't want a sociopath who murders puppies because they are slight inconvenience and brags about it, but apparently that has not disqualified her yet. Okay, when we come back, two amazing stories left for you guys at least. Is Donald Trump actually gonna go to jail? I know, but the judge is actually threatening it. And Ben Shapiro versus Candace Owens, could that happen right here on TYT? Maybe. Okay, we'll explain when we come back.
Animals are innocent.
Let's go to YouTube Super Chat. Chaplain Fred's back. He writes in, hi Anna and Cenk again. I've seen scary people in my life and not been scared, but this lady gives me the creeps. Referring to Kristi Noem. So Morgan writes in, Cenk with the fresh cut, gray peaking, zaddy looks. Well, thank you, I appreciate it. That's a high compliment. Andrew writes in, as for younger voters, we millennials are entering our voting prime and realize we are the orphans of the American dream. Damn, Andrew, really well put. I might use that from now on. That's terrific. It sucks that it's happening, but saying that you're the orphans of the American dream is kind of a very powerful way of putting it. Hisham Al-Khatib writes in, great journalism, TYT, keep it up. Thank you, Hisham, appreciate it. Jenna 111382 wrote in, Cenk, I recently tagged you as my hero. Thank you. which you and Anna are very much are, on Twitter in response to your debate on Israel-Palestine. In a hope it would brighten your mentions, which on Twitter seem to be a hateful hellscape. Appreciate you, #TeamJoy. Jenna, thanks for doing that, you're amazing. And yes, if you wanna have a good belly laugh, check out my mentions on Twitter. It is the most toxic place on earth. Every troll and bot from every wing of the political spectrum has gathered there. It's now mainly IDF trolls and bots, okay, but others come in as well. Although they started fighting so much, the different trolls and bots, that some have started to go, wait, am I accidentally on Cenk's side? Okay, so it's kind of hilarious. Get high and look at them. And you'll have a good laugh / be terrorized by what's out there in the world. Okay, Tora Williams writes in, homesick from work to get to watch live, which never happens. Thank you for all the accurate coverage regarding Israel. Love TYT. Thank you, Cenk and Anna, for all your amazing work. Tora, thank you for saying that. I love people watching live. Let's get more people to watch live. Share the stream whenever you can, every day if you can, and let people know, because we have so much fun. This never goes in any clip. Thanking you guys, reading your comments, a billion things that don't go into the clips. Guy on his own Crusade 35 writes in, hi, Cenk and Anna. Thank you for covering this story in the Middle East. It's black and white clear that Israel took this opportunity to take revenge on Palestinians rather than on Hamas. Israel and US politicians are Islamophobes. Yeah, it's collective punishment, and it's on the wrong people. They're taking out on the Palestinians what the Germans did to them. Tyler Pitry writes in, greetings from Canada. I've been watching since I was a kid, which means you're both getting old, but still looking great, guys.
Hey.
Okay.
Let's relax, okay?
I get that all the time at airports and stuff. I've been watching you since I was in junior high. The guy's like 40. I'm like, ah.
Yeah, okay.
But I love it. I love that we've been around, that you guys have been watching the whole time. You guys are the best. Vince Pomo writes in, love TYT since 2012. Yow, thank you in Pomo language. Yow hi, I tried. We'll be back. Back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Ari Jenkins. Ari, thank you for hitting the join button. We really appreciate you. We're all TYT together. Anna.
We've got some updates on the hush money trial in New York. Let's get right to it.
And then you have the other thing that maybe is even more disgraceful is the gag order, where I have to watch every word I tell you people. You ask me a question, a simple question, I'd like to give it, but I can't talk about it. Because this judge has given me a gag order and said you'll go to jail if you violate it. And frankly, you know what? Our Constitution is much more important than jail. It's not even close. I'll do that sacrifice any day.
Donald Trump says he would sacrifice jail time in order to be able to speak his mind and go against a gag order that he is dealing with in the hush money trial in New York. Now, Trump ended the 12th day of his hush money trial this afternoon by complaining to the press yet again about the gag order that has been put in place by the judge, that's Juan Merchan. Now, the judge also threatened the former president with time behind bars, jail time, if he violates the gag order yet again, something he seems poised to do, and might actually see as a political calculation that could help him raise money and garner even more support among voters, including right-leaning independent voters. We'll have that conversation in just a moment. But Trump did violate his gag order 10 times, according to the judge, who fined him yet another $1,000 for comments that he made during an April 22nd interview on Real America's Voice. Here's the part in question.
This judge said that you can't get away from the trial. You know, he's rushing the trial like crazy. Nobody's ever seen a thing go like this. That jury was picked so fast. 95% Democrats. The area is mostly all Democrat. You think of it as just a purely Democrat area. It's a very unfair situation, that I can tell you.
So the judge has made clear that Trump is free to attack him as much as he wants, but he can't attack the jurors. And in that statement, he's implying that since the jury pool was chosen from a predominantly Democrat area or a heavily blue area, it is likely that all the jurors are Democrats or political opponents to Trump. That is what he's implying there. And so that's why the judge took issue with it and said, if you violate your gag order and attack the jury again, you're gonna serve time behind bars.
This is so confusing. I don't know what I can say and can't say anymore. There's only one thing you can't say. You can't say anything against the jurors or the witnesses.
That's it.
Wow, that's so complicated. I thought you were a very stable genius. You just can't keep that in your head. So like attacking the jurors, number one thing you cannot do, right? And so if you guys watch that and you go, wait, like he just said they're Democrats. That's not necessarily attacking them. It doesn't have to be, I want you to go and find out where these guys live and show them who's boss. You don't have to say that. But remember, his fans have sent pipe bombs to people that he has threatened or mentioned before as his opponents. And here he's saying the jury is unfair, it's rigged against me. And so these are my opponents, these jurors.
Right, he's implying that they're all Democrats and thus all opponents to Trump, and that it's an unfair system or this is an unfair trial. In fact, the judge called out Trump's attempt to delegitimize the entire trial and the jurors. He says defendant not only called into question the integrity and therefore the legitimacy of these proceedings, but again raised the specter of fear for the safety of the jurors and their loved ones. Now look, again, he's making statements about the jury, trying to make it appear as though the jury is illegitimate, his political opponents. But here's the reality. I think people are gonna see that statement that got him in trouble and led to his violation of the gag order, and they're gonna say, no, this guy's he's being politically persecuted. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't threaten the jurors. He didn't direct any violence toward the jurors. And so what I'm worried about is if the judge makes good on his promise, because we know Trump is gonna violate his gag order. He can't help himself. Whether he does so intentionally or unintentionally, I think is an interesting conversation that I wanna have. But I feel that he is going to violate the gag order, and I don't think the judge is gonna put him behind bars. And if he puts him behind bars for a statement like the one he made on that conservative news show, well, I think a lot of people are gonna think it's unfair.
Well, they're gonna think that it's nebulous enough that and they're gonna think it's the only violation he had.
Right.
It's in fact going to be the 11th violation he has, but whichever the last one is the only one that people will look at. And unless he says, I want you to murder the jurors, they're gonna say it was unfair. They're like, oh, well, look, I mean, what does that really mean, etc., right? So, but as you were talking, Anna, I was thinking, look, I've always assumed that it was unintentional. He has verbal diarrhea and he just can't contain himself. So he's like, it's so unfair. And he, like, one post he had on Truth Social just said in all caps, not fair. He sounds like a child. He's like, that's exactly what children say 24/7, not fair. I wanted that cookie and my brother got it instead, right? So I got that part and that's what I was assuming. But then as you were saying, maybe intentionally, I thought, actually, I'm even afraid to say it out loud, but it's not that bad a tactic. All he has to do is threaten one of the jurors and maybe he gets a tiny bit of jail time.
Gets like a night behind bars. He raises a ton of money.
But not only that, they'd probably have to do a retrial. And okay, because at that point, the juror's gonna say, are they gonna murder me? I can't stay on this jury, right?
That's a really good theory.
Yeah.
And because it's true. I mean,
he's gonna lose. He knows he's gonna lose. He never has any evidence. This is the case that he has the best chance of winning because he can say, well, I was doing it to protect my wife. I was doing it, yeah, but Michael Cohen is a lawyer and I paid him for legal fees. It just happened to be for bribes, but it's legal fees. Like, it's not impossible for him to win, even though he clearly falsified the business records. But he knows he did it. He knows he's guilty. So anytime he's in trouble, he might just want to, at some point, purposely screw up the jury pool so that the judge has to say, okay, we have to start over. And that would be a huge advantage for Trump.
It would be a huge advantage for Trump. But also, even if that's not what the plan is, in the short term, there are benefits as well, because it's not like the judge is going to throw him in prison for like a year or even a week. I think if anything, it'll be like for a night or two. And that makes Trump a sympathetic figure for some of the more moderate Republican voters or independent voters who lean to the right, who might have soured on Trump or never really bought into Trump, but might feel compelled to support him if they start viewing him as some sort of political figure who's facing political attacks, right? Being persecuted for being a Republican candidate who's a target by the Democratic Party. So I think that's a possibility. And every time his indictments heat up or something happens in trials, he increases his financial backing by Republican voters. He starts seeing a spike in donations to his campaign. So I thought maybe there's a possibility that he could intentionally violate the gag order in order to garner more support among voters. But the other thing I want to say that goes counter to this theory is that there are moments that legitimately make it appear as though Trump doesn't know what the rules are. And what I mean by that is, he made a statement fairly recently about how he didn't believe that he was able to testify in this trial because of the gag order. No, the gag order is about your conduct outside of the trial, right? It's not about your ability to participate within the trial. Of course, he'd be able to testify as a witness or testify during his own trial. The gag order doesn't impact that.
Well, there's two possibilities there. One is that he's a grade A moron and doesn't know the simplest things about the law, as Anna's suggesting here. And especially when you're under trial, you never ask your lawyer, hey, does the gag order prevent me from testifying? That's like the simplest question. You never ever asked your lawyer. It's possible because he is that dumb, right? But now, of course, the other possibility is no, he's lying on purpose. He's like, oh my God, I'm the victim, not fair, okay? Sally got 2 more cookies than I did, not fair, right? So he's saying it's not fair that he's not allowed to say anything about politics, which is obviously not true.
Right. Now, in regard to the court proceedings today, there was testimony by a Trump organization employee, someone who actually worked under Weisselberg, and the testimony seemed to try to distance Donald Trump from the hush money deal that was made with Stormy Daniels. So one of the people who testified today is a former Trump organization controller. McConney is his name, and according to prosecutors, McConney assisted in arranging Trump's reimbursement payment to Michael Cohen for the $130,000 in hush money that Cohen had fronted to Stormy Daniels. Now, McConney testified on the origins of the hush money payment reimbursement paper trail, saying that Alan Weisselberg, who he worked under at the Trump organization, said he had to get some money to Michael Cohen. We had to reimburse Michael. He tossed a pad toward me and I started taking notes on what he said. And so, he's mentioning Weisselberg there, not Donald Trump, directing or dictating the orders. But I did remember an interesting statement that Rudy Giuliani had made while speaking to Sean Hannity back in 2018 about the hush money payments and what Trump knew and didn't know about the hush money payments. Let's take a look at that video.
Newly hired attorney Rudy Giuliani acknowledged President Trump repaid Cohen.
That was money that was paid by his lawyer, the way I would do out of his law firm funds or whatever funds, doesn't matter. The president reimbursed that over a period of several months.
Appearing on Fox News Hannity, Giuliani maintained the president was unaware of details of the Stormy Daniels matter until recently.
I believe that's what he didn't know about the specifics of it, as far as I know. But he did know about the general arrangement that Michael would take care of things like this.
Giuliani told the New York Times that Mr. Trump made a series of payments to Cohen of $35,000 each, totaling as much as $460,000 for what he called incidental expenses.
They funneled it through the law firm. And the president repaid it.
The president reinforced the point on Twitter this morning. He said that Mr. Cohen, an attorney, received a monthly retainer, not from the campaign and having nothing to do with the campaign. These agreements are very common among celebrities and people of wealth.
Now remember, in this trial, Trump is accused of falsifying business documents in order to conceal a crime. What is the crime? Well, in this case, the crime is violation of campaign finance limits and tax fraud because he tried to reimburse Michael Cohen in a way that made up for the taxes that he would have to pay for the new income that he was getting in these reimbursements from Donald Trump.
Yeah, look, that Giuliani clip was just a flat out confession.
Amazing, right?
Yeah, I mean, they say that Giuliani is like now a significant drinker, right? So I don't know if he's admitting these things because he's on the sauce or he's just an idiot, right? But
or both,
right? But it's not just Rudy. Trump often says things that totally prove that he's guilty. He's like, of course we made the payments. When you're famous and you got to cover things up, you make payments. That's falsifying your records, you moron. That's like you're just admitting it. What's amazing in all this, and come on, MAGA guys, to this moment, Trump has still not admitted that he actually had an affair with Stormy Daniels. Okay, look, good news. He can take the stand and then prove that he never had an affair with Stormy Daniels and this money never even existed and never even went to her. Good luck. All right, in the bonus episode for the members, Candace Owens challenges Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro apparently lying about accepting that challenge. Really interesting story, but if they debate, should they do it on Young Turks? Could be. Let's talk about it. TYT.com/team to become a member or hit the join button below if you're on YouTube. We'll see you there.